Good evening. Welcome to the Cobb County Democrats virtual town hall for Superior Court judge candidates. I am Jacqueline Bettadapour, the chair of the Cobb County Democratic Committee. Assisting me tonight is our first vice chair, Matt Southwell. We are speaking tonight with three candidates, John Greco, Jason Marbutt, and Gregory Shenton. They are seeking to be elected to the Superior Court bench currently occupied by Judge Schuster, who is not seeking re-election. Election day for judges is June 9th. There is no primary. Candidates who win a vote majority will be the candidate to assume Schuster's bench. This is a nonpartisan election without party affiliation. Therefore, candidates for judge will appear on the Democratic primary ballot, the Republican primary ballot, and the nonpartisan ballot. These candidates will appear toward the bottom of the Democratic primary ballot, so please be sure to vote all the way down to the bottom. Do not stop at the top. Do not vote for president, U.S. Senate, whatnot, and then go home. Continue voting all the way down the ballot. And please vote by mail. You do not have to put your health on the line and risk exposure to the virus to have your voice be heard. For more information on absentee voting, please visit our website, cobbdemocrats.org. The Superior Court of Cobb County has exclusive equity jurisdiction over all cases of divorce, title to land, and felonies involving jury trials, including death penalty cases. There are 10 elected judges who preside over jury trials, rule on evidence, hear motions, and render verdicts in bench trials. Each Superior Court judge is elected to a 4-year term. So let's hear from the candidates. We'll start with 2-minute opening statements, followed by questions with a 90-second response time, 45-second rebuttals if a candidate or a candidate's position is called out by the opposing candidate, and then 2-minute closing statements. Matt Southwell will be keeping the time. So first, we will hear from John Greco. John, go ahead and introduce yourself to voters. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Jacqueline and Matt, for putting me on this forum and allowing me the opportunity to address the voters. Hello, Cobb voters. My name is John Greco. I am a 1984 graduate of Emory School of Law. I'm married to Robin. She's a Cobb County school teacher. We have 2 daughters. Basically, I'd like to tell the voters that I have 36 years of experience in practicing law. I am both not only a lawyer, but a businessman, because I've been a sole practitioner for 36 years completely. I have nobody that really helps me other than communicating with fellow lawyers about issues and things of that nature. So I've done all the investigation, all the operation, all the courtroom hearings and everything, and very seldom do I ever have any assistance whatsoever. I would like the voters to be impressed by my experience. I've handled thousands of cases, probably over 6,000, with a variety of them being appointed and indigent cases. I've represented persons of all races, ethnic backgrounds, economic status. So there is nobody that is, in my mind, one way or the other, more important than any of my clients. So when I represent people, I represent the people that come to me, and the indigent, the economically challenged, racial, whatever. There's no indication in my mind that I've ever treated anybody any differently because of that. As a judge, I will operate in the exact same form and fashion.
Thank you. Next, Jason Marbutt. Introduce yourself to voters. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you giving this forum and giving us the opportunity to talk. Again, my name is Jason Marbutt. I currently am a senior assistant district attorney in the Cobb DA's office. I'm the head of the white collar elder abuse and public integrity unit. I too, throughout the course of my career as a prosecutor, the past 15 years, have handled thousands of cases here in Cobb County. I'm an adjunct professor of Emory, at Emory School of Law. I teach a class on sentencing. I'm the chairman of the Cobb Elder Abuse Task Force. I'm the founder and the driving force behind the JEDI MDT, which is a multidisciplinary task force between public service agencies that deal with elder abuse and disabled individuals. I'm a board member on the Marietta Metro Rotary Club. I coached the Walton High School mock trial team. We were very disappointed this year about the cancellation of state tournament. We thought we were going to do very well in the state tournament this year. I don't have a child on that team. I just do it because and I've done it for a number of years now because I enjoy working with kids. I've coached over 20 sports teams in Cobb County at all levels. That's mostly through my 3 children that I have, but I've also coached other high school teams. I was the coach for the Alexander High School wrestling team when I was in law school, and we got a second place in state. I'm a former teacher. I taught at the high school for a year at the Punahou School in Hawaii. That's where Barack Obama went to school. And I was spent 2 years teaching middle school math and science in Newark, New Jersey, as part of Teach for America. My wife was also a Teach for America alum. She was in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I was born here in Cobb County, born in Austell, and I used college as an opportunity to travel. I grew up in neighboring Douglas County. And after law school, where I met my wife, we built a house in Mableton. We've raised our 3 kids here. We're in public schools here. I've made my career here. I'm known throughout the state for my work on elder abuse and white collar crime. I'm known as the guy who will get the job done with honesty, integrity, and without fear or favor. Thank you for the opportunity to talk tonight.
Thank you, Jason. Next up, Gregory Shenton. Gregory, you have 2 minutes.
All right. Thank you so much for having us here. Thank you for the opportunity in these unique times where traditional campaigning can't happen for us to reach out. If you want to learn more about me than what I can tell you tonight, you can go to gregforjudge.com and learn more about me. But I live here in Smyrna with my wife, Karen, our 2 kids. My wife's a teacher at Smyrna Elementary School. She gave up a lucrative career to go teach at Title I schools. That's been her calling. I am now looking to give up my civil practice for a spot on the bench. You can't find many civil business lawyers to run for the bench because they don't have the financial incentive to do so. I went to the Emory University School of Law and graduated in 2000. I was a president of the Graduate Senate, vice president of the Student Bar Association, worked to bring on-campus childcare during my time there for graduate students at Emory. At Transylvania, I played baseball, ran cross country, and worked as a short order cook at the Grill. I practiced law for 20 years. I started with a big firm, became partner with a mid-sized firm, and started my own shop on the Marietta Square in 2012. Like John, I run my own business, and I represent family-owned businesses here in Cobb County, small businesses, folks who are the lifeblood of the economy. I've appeared in every court in federal, at the state and federal level. And when I say that, I mean not every single court, but every level of court, except for the U.S. Supreme Court. I've argued in front of the 11th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals on a multi-million-dollar class action insurance coverage action. I've litigated in cases from Nevada, Illinois, to Texas, to Georgia. I've seen more cases than any other more different courts than any other candidate in any race. And I can tell you that the court in Cobb County is second to none. It would be an absolute honor if the voters of Cobb County would ask me to join their ranks. I'd like to extend my community service to the community that I've done through the Cobb Bar in Kiwanis, but I can tell you a little bit more about that later. Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
So now we'll move to the question and answer segment, and we'll go in rotating order for responses. We'll start with the first question, and we'll start with Jason Marbutt. The question is, what makes for a good judge? Many of us are lay people. We're not attorneys. Most of us have had limited exposure to courtrooms and the criminal justice system, yet we're being asked to vote on who would be a good judge. So I'm asking for you to sort of educate our voters as to what you think makes for a good judge and what should voters be looking for in your background and experience to evaluate you as a candidate.
Yes, ma'am. I'm actually glad that's the first question, because as I've talked with the public in campaigning over the past few months, I've noticed something, and I want to start up front with that. When you ask who makes a good judge, I think sometimes people misunderstand that there are different types of judges, and what makes one type of judge a good judge might not necessarily apply in another sense. What we are running for this race is a trial level position. We are the workers in essence of the court system. We are the lowest level court. Well, not the lowest because there's magistrate and juvenile and probate, those sorts of things. But we are the trial level court where people are going to have their trials, as opposed to the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. And so sometimes people forget about the skill sets that are needed for a trial lawyer as opposed to the skill set that's needed for an appeals lawyer. And Court of Appeals makes law. They write opinions, they review cases, they look at facts, they write opinions, and their opinions are binding on the superior courts. And of course, the Georgia Supreme Court would be above the Court of Appeals. At this level, what I think makes the best candidate is somebody who has trial experience. And I will tell you that I'm at the top of my game in terms of trial experience. I have tried and been involved in trials more than 100. I think, and candidly, I'll say this, I think Mr. Greco has a tremendous amount of trial experience as well. So I don't besmirch his trial experience, but I am also in that area something, and I think that's something that the public should look at, and I think they should look at
Jason,
also
your time's up.
manage caseloads.
Thank you, Jason. Greg Shenton.
Thank you very much. A trial judge, first and foremost, needs to be a good listener. They must have a good demeanor, a judicial demeanor. They must have character, a dedication to service. That's what would make me a good trial judge, is my demeanor, my ability to listen, my ability to consider all points fairly. I, too, have a lot of trial experience. I have tried very large cases, multi-million-dollar cases. But it's also important that a judge treat every person who walks into that courtroom with dignity and kindness and respect. For many folks who are coming into court, it is the most stressful day of their life. Even if sometimes they're just a witness, they're so nervous. And I think that is extremely important for a judge to consider. They must be transparent. We're accountable to the voters every 4 years. If I'm elected, I will be. But if you look into my background, you look at the diversity of my experience. Like I said, I've seen a tremendous amount of different courtrooms. I've tried cases all over. My service to the community tells you about my character. It tells you about my demeanor. My own business, owning my own business and running my own business, it will tell you that I can identify with the folks who come into the courtroom and my dedication to justice. That's what makes a good judge, and that's why I would be a good judge. And I thank you for the question. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. And now we have John Greco. So to repeat the question, what makes for a good judge, and what should voters be looking for in your background and experience to evaluate you?
In following up and coming behind the last two candidates in their particular statements, some of this will be repetitive because I think it applies to all of us, but you have to have knowledge and experience of your subject matter. Experience comes through my 6,000 and so cases that I've been in courts all over Georgia, over 55 counties before hundreds and hundreds of different judges. I have participated in jury trials, numerous ones, hard cases and simple cases. Ultimately, that experience alone is something that I think I exceed just due to my years in practice over the other two candidates. You have to have the ability to listen, like Greg said, because that's the most important thing you're going to do is listen to both sides carefully to reach the best result and the fair and impartial result in court. Ultimately, my experience with different people all over my representation is a plus in the experience. I think a judge also has to have courage. You can't always please everybody. You have to make tough decisions, and sometimes the right decision may not be the most popular decision, and you got to be willing to do that and be truthful to yourself and truthful to your litigants.
Thank you. So continuing in a rotating order, the next question, first up for response is Greg Shenton. The question, in plain English, can you explain your judicial philosophy? That would be judicial activism versus judicial restraint, loose constructionism versus strict constructionism, or living document versus original intent.
Certainly. As Jason noted, this is more like a trial. This is a trial court. This is not really an appellate court. You know, you hear some of those terms when you listen to the Supreme Court confirmation hearings and things like that. You know, that kind of philosophy, I think, is really an appellate issue. But the biggest decision that's going to keep me up at night if I'm a trial court judge and the Superior Court is, you know, who gets the kids? Superior Courts handle family laws, cases, criminal felonies, complex civil cases. It's the Harris Hines said that this is the most powerful court in the state, or the Supreme Court judge is the most powerful position in the state. And that's because you directly affect people's lives in the most meaningful ways. You know, to me, that my philosophy is to treat people, like I said, with dignity, kindness, and respect. The General Assembly passes the laws, the appellate courts interpret them. And so the trial judge follows those laws and exercises their discretion based upon the individual circumstances that are before them. So you have to listen. My philosophy is to treat people fairly, treat people evenly. You know, I've never been a district attorney. I've never been a criminal defense attorney. I haven't made a career of being on one side or the other. My background is that I've been a plaintiff and I've been a defendant as far as being counsel is concerned. So I'll come in unbiased and fair, and I will treat every litigant with that fairness and make sure that they have their day in court. Thank you.
Thank you. John Greco.
When posed that question, I looked up the definition of philosophy, and basically it deals with ideas about knowledge, right and wrong reasoning, values, also a set of ideas on how you may look at something, or, you know, how you judge people to live and things of that nature. In applying that to the question as completed by yourself, not really interested in taking on the role of the executive branch or the legislative branch. Those have our purpose in government. The basic thing that I look at is that the core principles of myself and my practice has always been based on honesty, fairness, equality, respect. I think that if you're truthful to the public and truthful to yourself, you believe in the Constitution, every specific facts case deserves independent consideration, and that's what our appellate courts are there for, to review and to determine whether or not things were done correctly at the lower level. I think that a fair and just resolution can be found as long as you follow this ideology, and that's how I'm going to approach my judgeship if elected.
Great, thank you. And Jason Marbutt on judicial philosophy.
In the past 15 years working here in the Cobb County court system, working through thousands of cases, I've learned that cases that I might consider simple are not necessarily simple to the litigants who have that case. And so one philosophy is to simply treat the small cases as if they're large cases. You've got to treat everything with integrity and understand that the people who are coming before the court are there because they have a conflict and they need someone to help them resolve it. Sometimes, unfortunately, they're forced to be there to resolve it, but we still need to listen to them and help them be heard, and that's how justice is delivered. I think that my philosophy of making decisions as a prosecutor will be the same philosophy that I will have as a judge, and that is I look at things from two perspectives, and that's can I and should I? The can I part is, what does the law allow me to do? What does the law give me discretion to do versus what the law dictates that I must do? And a trial court judge is going to be bound to follow the law. That's the expectation. We're not there to make our own law. We're there to follow the law that's given to us. But there's a lot of things, or there are a lot of things that we're given discretion on, and that's the should I component. You've got to look at things from the standpoint of, will this be a just decision? Will this make someone feel heard? Will this help the conflict be resolved in a way? And that really comes from experience in dealing with lots of cases and lots of people through different manners and walks of life.
Thank you. The next question, and this will go to John Greco first. How does one balance being an elected official, having to run a campaign and accept campaign donations, with being an independent judge?
Well, as we all know, we are an elected position, and obviously there's expenses in getting your name and your reputation and your ability to serve the public out to the public in certain forms. In a county as large as Cobb County, of course, most voters will be unknown to the candidate, and the candidate may be unknown to a lot of the voters in some forms or fashion, and you remain in that status before, during, and after the election. I guess you'd have to watch out, really, if you receive campaign funds from special interest groups, because care would be needed to not show any predisposition, favoritism, or impropriety as it comes to such a group. Most of the campaigns that I've watched other potential judge candidates go to is you normally get campaign contributions from friends, coworkers, people that know you from the legal community. A lot of them are lawyers. I don't think that there's a problem with taking any type of campaign contribution from those persons, because they've never had the opportunity or never really had the reason to question your character, impartiality, things of that nature, as a lawyer in the Cobb County circuit. So in regards to that, I think that you can balance it very easily by just considering your values, staying honest, your integrity, and not let anybody take favoritism over one person or another.
Thank you. Jason Marbutt.
I think the answer to your question is essentially that we are bound as candidates by the Code of Judicial Conduct in the same way that we would be bound if elected. And we know that, and we sign on to that whenever we become candidates. So it would be nice if we lived in a world where we didn't have to seek contributions. But as John alluded to, we're a large county. I think we're 800, 900,000 people. We have more people in this county than some states. It's impossible to reach all of the voters. It certainly is impossible to run a campaign without some sort of money and contributions. And so it becomes one of those things where I think we're all very careful. I certainly know that I am, but I believe that Mr. Shenton and Mr. Greco also are, that we try and be careful in terms of where the money is coming from. We are required to report that, so there are disclosures for all of our money. And if any one of us were to make the bench, that is public information so that people would know where those contributions came from. And if there were ever any issues where somebody has contributed and there was some question of impropriety or even just the thought of it, then we can always recuse and have another judge hear those matters in those cases. I think it's something that all judicial candidates have to look at. And I think I agree with John. I really do, that you just have to keep your own values and character of integrity in place and be open and honest about those things.
Thank you. And Greg Shenton, you're next.
It's the same, and it's the same because Cobb County is very fortunate that when a judicial spot opens up here in Cobb County, good candidates, good, strong moral character candidates are going to come out and run. I don't have a bad thing to say about John or Jason, and I hope they don't have a bad thing to say about me. But there's no need to balance it because the money really doesn't affect too much. For that reason, you see a lot of the folks who contribute are lawyers that are within the bar, and many of them can contribute to all the candidates because the lawyers in our community recognize that it just takes money to run the race. The qualifying fee is just the tip of the iceberg. You've got yard signs and you've got digital media and advertising that you've got to do, and they recognize that as a reality. And so we've got a strong bar community that supports each other. So it's not a matter of favoritism. My supporters are my friends and my family. I would recuse myself if they ever appeared in my court just because they're friends and family, not because the check that they wrote to me to help my campaign. My campaign's on a minimal shoestring budget. I just announced that I was going to run in late February when Judge Schuster announced that he was retiring. I represent mom and pop businesses. They're hurting right now, and they don't have the money to bankroll somebody's expensive campaign. So good judges don't have to worry about soliciting donations when they're up for re-election because they're good judges, and the bar wants to keep them on the bench. So if I'm a good judge, I won't have to worry about it at all. Thank you.
Okay. Next question. How will you handle conflicts of interest on the bench? And if you could give us some idea of what potential conflicts of interest might look like as a Superior Court judge. Jason Marbutt, you're first up.
Sure. The answer is that I will follow the law, and we have a long history of precedent in dealing with these sorts of issues, conflict issues. There are rules in place, and I'll tell your viewers sort of basically the way that works is if there is something that would even give the appearance of a conflict, and let's say, for example, my wife is an attorney. Let's say my wife has a case and it ends up having to be filed in Superior Court and it got randomly wheeled and appeared in my courtroom. Well, then I would recuse. Obviously, I can't hear my wife's case if she's a litigant or an attorney for litigants on those sides. And then that case would get re-wheeled. It would get sent to another judge. So we've got 10 judges in Cobb County. They would hear it. There are other situations where somebody might question whether or not a judge has a conflict. And the litigants could file something, a motion to recuse. And the way that that's supposed to be handled, and that's the way that I would handle it, is you accept the facts as true. You don't argue with them. So I may disagree. I may think, well, that's not a conflict. But just the fact that somebody files that, you then take that motion, you send the motion to another judge, and that judge, without me as part of the process, will have a full hearing to hear about whether there's a conflict, and someone else, some other judge, will make a determination as to whether there's a conflict. And if they make that determination, same process as if I voluntarily recused, they'll take that case and they'll wheel it to someone else, yet a third judge. And so we have systems in place, and we'll follow the law and the systems in place to make sure that conflicts don't exist. And I think it's important so people can have faith in the process.
Thank you. Greg Shenton?
Gave a very factually correct answer.
Sorry, Greg, has some audio issues there at the start of your answer there.
Sure.
You're good now.
All right, thanks. Jason, presented what happens on the recusal process accurately. We have a great bench here. Like I said before, I've seen one motion to recuse in the cases I've handled here in Cobb County, and it was handled appropriately by the bench. It was handled appropriately by a secondary, a judge that was not the subject of the recusal motion. I, just from an attorney standpoint, didn't think that the recusal motion was warranted. What I have seen is that judges voluntarily recuse themselves, and that's the standard here in Cobb County when there's a conflict, and they follow it, and they follow it well. Cobb County's fortunate to have great judges with fantastic character. And so I would continue to follow that model because I think that is, we have great judges here. And if I rotate off a case, they're just going to get another great judge. So that's the best way to do it. If you want to preserve justice, you want to be the defender of due process as a Superior Court judge, this is the process that you follow. And that is tantamount to me is what a judge, trial court judge is. And that is the defender of due process for each litigant that comes in. And that's what I'll do.
Thank you. And rounding out the three, this question, we have John Greco.
Yes, Jacqueline. As Jason said, there are safeguards in place for determination legally if a conflict exists, whether or not somebody needs to be recused if it gets to that point in time. I think myself as a Superior Court judge, one of the first things that I would have to do is identify who is on my caseload and who's coming before me. Having represented so many people in Cobb County over the years, if I had represented somebody before in the past, I would obviously want to recuse and have myself that particular case assigned to a different judge. In court, sometimes before, sometimes even during court, conflicts may arise. I think what the conflict has to do is be identified. You have to openly discuss with the litigants the potential for conflict. And then once the determination has been made, whether or not it would be against maybe my personal interest, against my professional interest in the matter, then I would freely remove myself from the case and have it wheeled to another. I think the litigants have some say in it on whether or not they want to keep your case in your court, but you have to always make sure that your professional integrity and fairness and equity is not compromised in any form or fashion.
Great, thank you. The next question, we'll have Greg Shenton answer first. What changes do you think need to be made to better or improve the mechanism of resolving cases in Cobb County Superior Court?
Okay. you know, one of the things that judges concern themselves with are backlogs, handling cases efficiently. And I think we can accomplish that with increased reliance and use upon technology in order to achieve justice. Justice delayed is justice denied. And so you want to make sure that you run your courtroom efficiently. I would also make sure that you run it, in doing it efficiently, you decrease cost. The greatest obstacle for many folks to access the court system, particularly in family law cases and civil cases, is the cost of it. And if you can increase the efficiency and you can rely on technology where litigants can appear and their attorneys can appear by video over 15 minutes, as opposed to taking an attorney's entire morning to have them come to the courthouse, sit at a large motions hearing setting, spend an hour and a half in the courtroom, not even on their case, then stand up and make their arguments, spend 45 minutes on their case, and then drive back to their office. If you can eliminate some of that time by video technology, then you're increasing access to the courts. I would expand out the accountability courts, which are fantastic here in Cobb County. They're a model for the rest of the state. Our judges go to the other counties to talk about their accountability courts. And finally, I would increase my community involvement. I'm involved in the From the Classroom to the Courtroom program that the Cobb courts put on to educate our youth. And so to increase justice for all includes those who are our young folks, our students in the community. And I think that is,
Greg, your time is up.
Incredible program, period.
Thank you. John Greco, what changes do you think need to be made to resolve cases in the Cobb County Superior Court?
Obviously, as Greg alluded to, time is one of the most important things in the legal system that I believe needs to be shaved down as much as possible. This is not only for the attorneys who may have multiple courts and their livelihood is spent in the courtroom, but also for the litigants who have to spend time away from jobs, school, their children, other issues that may come up in their lives. So we have to streamline our time and make it as effective and useful as possible. I think that what I've seen over the years is I think there needs to be more communication between the litigants, more mediation, more communication to try to resolve a lot of these cases outside of the courtroom setting instead of waiting till you get to court to resolve those. And I think as a court, I think we should be available to assist in that process as much as we can. Ultimately, we've seen during this COVID crisis that there's advances in technology that could be used during this, a lot of these processes to streamline and to make sure that things are efficiently done without the appearance in court and waiting and waiting and waiting. So when you cut down the time, you cut down the money that it costs to operate your courtroom and the Superior Court as a whole. And I hope to assist in helping that and making my courtroom very user-friendly and a great time-consuming or lack of time-consuming way, an efficient way to run my courtroom.
Thank you. Jason Marbutt.
One of the things that you learn being a prosecutor early on in your career is how to manage a caseload. I started my work in the trenches of traffic court back for Barry Morgan more than 15 years ago. And you have thousands of traffic tickets that come in. You've got to make quick decisions. You've got to treat people fairly and move those cases. And you can't let cases languish. As I progressed through my career, as you move to felony work, you get less cases. And then the work that I'm doing right now, I certainly have a lower caseload because I'm in a specialty unit where I'm now in all the courtrooms instead of a single courtroom. But I'm able to watch and learn and see how each judge handles things differently. And they each has different things that they can do to improve their efficiencies. Ultimately, the spot that we're running for, I think Judge Schuster has a legacy or a history. He's done a good job of keeping his case count down. I assume that we will all be inheriting a pretty good caseload. But I will continue to do the things that I've learned to make sure that we are moving cases through. From a criminal perspective, sometimes that means putting pressure on the litigants. As John said, you've got to get them in a room together to talk. The old adage of trial lawyers is everybody wants a trial, just not today. And sometimes it takes the judge telling people you've got to make your decisions. In the civil arena, there's a little bit more give and take because you've got to let the litigants decide when they're ready. But ultimately, I think the video conferencing technology, the things that we've done to increase our efficiencies will save us time and effort and money, and will make everyone happier in the court system.
Thank you. The next question, and we'll have John Greco first. Would you as a judge have a role in ameliorating mass incarceration? If so, please explain what actions you could take.
In looking up and analyzing that question, ameliorating, of course, is making something bad or unsatisfactory better. Of course, the first thing that comes to mind is that we have alternative courts, and those alternative courts need to be used to the best of our ability as a county and as practicing attorneys within the county. There are drug courts, there are mental health courts, there's alcohol, DUI courts, there's veterans courts. We have to also use the private sector to use programs to assist with families, childcare, educate individuals, get them jobs, get them working. Rehabilitation is a key. Obviously, we want to rehabilitate people and put them back into society or make them useful persons in the society, and we need to give them our help. As to incarcerations, there will be cases when strict punishment is necessary, and it should be relevant to the offense. And basically, once you look at what's relevant to the offense, then you can focus on rehabilitation. Some people just need to be punished, and they will be. But we want people to be rehabilitated because we're all in this society together.
Thank you. Jason Marbutt, can you address mass incarceration and what sort of role you could play as a judge in making that, improving that situation?
I teach a class at Emory School of Law on sentencing, and one of the things that we do, or what we do in the class, is we give different fact patterns, and we talk about different ways that people can, we say, value the case, but ultimately, what is the sentence going to be? And it's always amazing to me the differing opinions about what is an appropriate sentence for each case. And I find that as throughout the semesters we have these conversations with students, people's opinions can change. Sometimes folks think that, I've got folks who think everybody deserves probation, no matter how bad the crime is. So I have some other folks who come at it from the perspective of everybody deserves to be in prison, no matter how, no matter how light the crime is, or how, if there's not many victims or that sort of thing. And it's always a conversation. I think that as a judge, we are sometimes bound by the law. There are some crimes that are going to have mandatory minimums, and that when you talk about justice reform and criminal justice reform, I think that's something that the legislature can address, but judges don't have any control over it. We're bound to apply that. But where we have discretion, we can look at the cases and decide what appropriate sentences are. Accountability courts are great. Cobb County is the leader in accountability courts. We need to recognize that our low-level drug offenders shouldn't be languishing in jail when treatment and rehabilitation are going to be there. And I think that comes from experience, and it's the hardest thing to learn. And so that's something why you should also look in somebody's background for their criminal justice experience to make those decisions.
Thank you. And Greg Shenton.
Thank you. This is mass incarceration is an issue that I've looked at from a social justice issue. The ACLU issued a report that talked about mass incarceration and noted the fact that the United States has 5% of the world's population, yet 25% of the prison population. They also noted that most folks who are in jail and incarcerated in the United States have not been found guilty of a crime. Rather, it's their pretrial, and they're waiting for their day in court. They're waiting to find out for their trial. And part of that reason is because of the bail system right now. The bail system, there's a large amount of discretion in the trial courts as to setting bail. We've got statutory factors to consider, whether somebody's a flight risk, likely to commit another felony, likely to intimidate witnesses. So, you've got to listen, you've got to pay attention to the individual factors that are there. A bond too high has been found to be no bond at all, and it's a violation of constitutional rights. While it's not an issue for trial courts, some counties do not accept insurance surety bonds for bail bonds, to back bail bonds. They require bail bondsmen to deposit on a cash basis only. That also inhibits the ability to bond folks out and overcrowds our jails. because bail bondsmen have limited writing capacity. Sentencing minimums, they handcuff judges. They're frustrating. It limits judicial discretion, and no two cases are the same. And it makes it impossible for judges to consider those. And we need to increase access and use of our accountability courts.
Thank you. So that concludes the question and answer. We'll move into our closing statements, and we will go with you first, Greg.
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, my service to the community has been a lifelong commitment of mine. I'm on the board of trustees for the Cobb Bar. I head up our golf tournament that benefits our Children's Emergency Fund, where we pay for emergency expenses for children, for Marietta and Cobb County school children. I'm on the board of directors for our Marietta Kiwanis Club. This week I've been going out and handing out lunches to school children off the back of Marietta City buses as part of my Kiwanis activity. I coach travel baseball program. Before I got married, had my own kids. I coach my own kids' teams. I learned that I was instilled with that sense of community responsibility from my parents growing up. My father was a Methodist minister. Many times, folks would come to our parsonage, which was right next door to the church, and ask for help. I remember one night there was a lady with her small child when I was about 10 or 11, knocked on our door on a rainy night, and it was about 1:30 in the morning. It woke me up. It woke my father up, and he took them over and gave them a dry place to stay, gave them food, gave them shelter, and stayed up all night with them while they slept on the couch in the fellowship hall of the church. I watched my mother work in the WIC department and handing out food vouchers to women and infants and children under 5 and provide them with necessary prenatal care. I am now, and my wife is now trying to instill those same values in our children. My wife's dedication to our community, as I mentioned before, is second to none. She gave up a lucrative career to teach elementary school and has only wanted to teach in Title I schools. It's part of the reason why I fell in love with her. Conley Ingram was a wonderful man, a wonderful judge. And when he welcomed people into court, he said, "Come on in, and what can I do for you today?" So I would love to hear what I can do for you. I want to model that Judge Ingram's example. After 20 years of practicing law, I want to now sit on the bench, and I'd be honored if y'all would elect me to the Superior Court bench. And you can go to gregforjudge.com to reach me for more. Thank you very much. And I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Greg. Jason Marbutt, your closing statement. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. First thing I want to say is that in the short period of time that we have, there's just not enough time to really talk about all the things that we want to talk about. So I'm going to give my webpage. It's Marbutt, MARBUTT, forjudge.com. And I hope that people will look up and try and find out more about me. I really am I'm a product of local schools. I was born in Austell, and I graduated from Alexander High School, neighboring Douglas County, and grew up in this area. And I really am representative of the American dream. Both of my parents came from humble beginnings and backgrounds. My mom grew up the youngest of, and I should have counted this number, but I'm just blanking right now. Honestly, I have so many aunts and uncles. I think she's the youngest of 8, maybe 9. I could do the math, but I don't have enough time. My dad is the youngest of 4. My mom, they were cotton farmers, and when the cotton picking season came around, they would quit school in rural Alabama and go out and pick cotton. They didn't have running water or electricity for the longest time. I am now an Ivy League educated public servant. I've spent my entire life in public service. I was a teacher through Teach for America and in a private school there in Hawaii. Before I went to law school, I've dedicated my life to public service, and this is a calling to me. And I truly am, I believe, the only candidate here who can say that I have devoted my entire life to that. I know what it's like to manage a caseload. I know what it's like to have efficiency be part of your work and to have to make decisions that affect multiple people from different backgrounds, as opposed to working in an area where if you own your own business, like my wife owns her own business and gives advice to clients, but the clients ultimately have to be responsible for the decision. As a prosecutor, you're responsible for those decisions. And no matter what, somebody walks out of that courtroom being unhappy with what you've done, but you've got to do what you think is right, following the facts and the law. And I'm going to do the same thing as a judge. I'm going to follow the facts, I'm going to follow the law, and I'm going to treat people fairly and listen to them and make sure that they have their day in their court and that they're heard. Thank you.
Thank you. And John Greco, your closing statement.
Yeah, tell the voters out there, a typical day of John Greco when he's practicing law is he may go to court in Fulton County and DeKalb County and Cobb County and Cherokee County all on the same day. He may go into Cobb County Superior Court and go before Judge Ingram, Judge Schuster, Judge Green, Judge Staley Clark, a number of judges. I continuously and habitually go to court day in and day out to help people of all races, backgrounds, economic status. I've done plenty of pro bono cases over my career. I've done indigent defense cases with the Cobb County Circuit Defender. I have represented the people of Cobb County for 36 years running my own practice. I'm invested with this in this county. I met my wife in this county. I moved to the city of Marietta shortly after finishing up law school in 1984. I love Cobb County. Now it is my time to set aside what I've been as a criminal defense lawyer and practicing lawyer for 36 years, is to set aside my personal, I guess you could say, gain, and to help this community. And one of the ways that I can help this community even more is to sit as a Superior Court judge and help all parties that come before my court by being fair, by being just, by listening to what they say, and by making the right decision, hopefully, in almost in every single case that comes before me. I think my honesty and integrity in practice and in the community, especially within my peers, even some of the DAs, I think would agree that, you know, I've been a straight shooter all my life and all my practice, and that's what I'll bring to the people of Cobb County.
Thank you, John. So that concludes this installment of the Cobb Democrats Virtual Town Hall Series. I'd like to thank John Greco, Jason Marbutt, and Greg Shenton for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you spending time with us and educating the voters about your campaigns. So join us next Tuesday, May 5th, 7 p.m. right here on Facebook for a conversation with candidates for Cobb County Superior Court Green. To see a recording of this town hall and the others we have broadcast, please visit our YouTube channel, Cobb County Democrats. Thank you all for watching. And again, vote on June 9th. Don't stop at the top. And please consider voting by mail, as it is the safest and most convenient way to vote without risking your health and exposure to the COVID-19 virus. Stay well, stay healthy. Good night.
Thank you.